Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jones. If you're new here, welcome. I like to talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, and today is something really cool. I am in the middle of October, and so are most of you who are watching this right now. And so that means we're watching horror films, and I really love this time of year because horror is definitely one of my favorite genres, especially one of the more recent genres that I've really loved in the last probably 10 years of my life, ever since I was, kind of in the late teens, if you will. But anyway, I hope everyone's enjoying their October. This is actually a first part of a series that I want to start. This is going to be a two-part series. Just talking about my favorite films from the 1920s all the way up to the 2020, so I guess the 2010s, if you will. And so this is actually going to just cover 19, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60 films. All films from those eras right there. And then I'm going to talk in the second part of later on this month, I'll talk about those films as well. So what I'm doing today is I'm actually going to be talking about two films from each decade, and one of them I have seen before and probably my favorite film from that particular decade, and then I would say one of them is something I haven't seen, so I can't really speak too much on it, but I'm definitely excited to check it out. And then I'm going to ask each of you, what are your favorite films from these decades, and what are some films that you might want to check out yourself. So let's actually first jump into a film from the 1910s, and it's actually a film that has 10 episodes in it, and it's not particularly a horror film from what I've gathered. It's something I have not seen yet, and in fact, some of you who have been on this channel before know that I probably have this, but I actually wanted to talk about Les Vampires. And Les Vampires is from 1915 to 1916, and this is actually 10 episodes long and is 417 minutes, which is probably the reason why I haven't watched it yet. And I know a lot of people who have seen it have said that it's not particularly a horror film in kind of the traditional sense, but it's something that I've been on my mind that I've wanted to watch. And honestly, the films from the 1910s, when it comes to horror films, are something that are not super existent, and or at least in my eyes, I am very, very new to that. So I actually would like to ask all of you, are there any films that I should check out in the 1910s that would be in the horror genre? Because I would love to check out more. But yeah, this Les Vampires, this is the Kino Classics edition right here with a lot of extra features. But yeah, no, this is more like an espionage film that I'm really, really looking forward to. But yeah, what are some horror films from 1910s that you've seen? I actually am curious. So let's actually move on from here to the 1920s. All right, so I picked two films from the 1920s, and I actually picked two horror films. One of them is one that I have not seen, one I have seen is my favorite film of the decade. So let's actually begin chronologically. So let's first start with 1920's The Golem, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce the German version of this. This is from 1920 and how he came into the world. And this is a film that my friend, film blogger Sam, actually, I think the other day, talked about how he watched this and he really enjoyed it. So that put that on my queue, and I'm like, oh, I got to watch this sometime soon. And so The Golem is something that I've always seen an image of this film, and I've always seen that iconic image of the Golem itself, and I'm like, this is something that would be really interesting. It's only 76 minutes from Germany, and yeah, no, I'm excited to check this one out. Have any of you seen The Golem? I actually am curious down in the comment section down below if you've seen it. So let's actually move on from here to my favorite film of the 1920s when it comes to horror, and this one should not really surprise many of you. It's the film from 1922, F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu. This film is just phenomenal, and it's something that still creeps me out to this day, and probably creeps out many of you as well. But every time I see Max Schreck as Count Orlok, I'm just terrified with it. And then the shadows and the production in this film, the camera work, everything about this works so well. And I'm really, really in love with this film. This is the Kino Classics edition right here. And just like with Les Vampires, it has a lot of extra features in it and has different scores. It has a new HD 35mm restoration. It has interludes with English and German, and it has original score. It has The Language of Shadows 2007 documentary on Nosferatu and other excerpts from other films from F.W. Murnau. And so yeah, I love this film, and if you haven't seen Nosferatu, go do yourself a favor because it's just phenomenal. But yeah, those are my films from the 1920s. What about you? What are some films that you like from the 1920s, some horror films? Let me know and down in the comment section down below. I'm really curious about it. So let's actually move on from here to the 1930s, which is definitely one of the biggest decades for horror. All right, so for horror, I know a lot of people are super into a lot of the Universal horror monster films, and I actually have one for you. One from 1931. It could be a few things, I'm sure many of you have guessed. And actually, mine is Frankenstein with Boris Karloff. And actually, this is the Alex Ross Steelbook right here. This Alex Ross Steelbook is just gorgeous. In fact, I actually have all of these steelbooks of the Universal horror monsters, and if you actually want to see all of them, I actually might make a video if enough of you are curious. Put that down in the comment section. But yeah, Boris Karloff and Frankenstein, holy crap, the makeup in this film, just the movement, everything about it, the production. I guess I kind of hinted at it with the German expressionist films like Nosferatu a little bit earlier in the 20s, but you also have stuff like, Metropolis or the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. A lot of that kind of carried over to Universal, and Universal also really thought about set design, production, and a lot of these other things that really create mood and atmosphere, and that's something that I really, really love. In fact, a film that I'm not talking about, which is the glaring omission, is Dracula, right, from 1931 with Bela Lugosi. I really love that film as well. In fact, I actually just watched it last night, and I really, really love it. And I love Renfield. He's just super crazy in this film. But anyway, with Boris Karloff's Frankenstein and Dracula, these really kind of set the standard for what we would see, coming up in the 1930s and even in the 40s a little bit as well. And yeah, no, I absolutely love this film. I'm sure many of you have already seen this before. If you haven't, definitely go do yourself a favor and watch 1931's Frankenstein, because it's just really, really great. Based on Mary Shelley's novel, and it's not really the closest adaptation of it, but it's a really, really good one. In fact, there's so many scenes in this film that really just are burned in my memory, and I just absolutely love it, and it's certainly one that will definitely stand the test of time, obviously. So now we're moving on to another film that I actually don't have currently on me. And a film, I actually looked through my collection looking for 1930s films that I haven't seen, and I've seen all of the ones that I own for horror films. So I actually picked up this TCM Fright Favorites book. Thank you to my girlfriend Vanessa, and then also Dave also, I think, mentioned it on one of his stories, Cinema Dave, and then also my friend Raquel, my new friend Raquel. They also mentioned this, and so I actually had to pick this up, and I had to give this a look, and I've looked through some of it, and I really, really like what I'm reading so far. But this kind of just breaks down each of these horror films all the way up to the modern era. And I was looking at some things from the 1930s that I'm in particularly interested in. Obviously, those Universal horror monsters like Frankenstein, The Mummy, Dracula. But there's one film that I really want to check out that I still haven't seen before, and is actually, if you have this book, you probably know where you can follow along with me, students, if you can. This is on page 46. I'm talking about The Mystery of the Wax Museum right here. In fact, actually my friend Stephanie, Movie Chatter, just recently talked about this film, and she just recently watched it. This movie looks terrifying. I mean, good God. Like, look at that makeup right there. And that's the thing I love about these 30s films, is the set design, the production, and then the costumes of these films are just really, really fantastic. In fact, here's another close-up of that film right there. But yeah, the history, the mystery of the Wax Museum is something that's certainly on my radar, and that's something I really want to watch. And this is actually a movie that came out in 1933. And yeah, I don't really know terribly too much about it, besides the fact that, I read about it in this book, and my friend Stephanie had mentioned it. And I'm just really curious to watch it, and I hope all of you are as well. So those are actually the films that I love in the 1930s. There's so many to choose from in the 1930s. It's like once you get more and more up in the years, you're going to pick so many things that you want to watch. But there's a lot of other things I want to watch as well. What about you? What about the films from in the 1930s? What would you recommend for horror films? What are your two favorites? Tell me down in the comment section down below. So let's actually move on from here to the 1940s. Some more horror monsters. All right, so we're into the 1940s, and we're still on that Universal kick. In fact, I have another Universal horror monster for you. And this one happens to be with Lon Chaney Jr. We're talking about the Wolfman. And here's another Alex Ross right here. That artwork is just so immaculate. It's so great. I love it. But the Wolfman, this is actually the first, I want to say when I picked up all of these Universal horror monsters. I've watched some of them in the past when I was a lot younger, but this was actually the first film that I watched. I recall watching when I was watching all of these sets. I didn't go in any chronological order. I just kind of was like, I want to watch the Wolfman. I don't know why, but that's the one I wanted to watch. And I just absolutely really enjoyed this film, and it's definitely one where like I can always imagine myself when I was a lot younger. I know that Burger King had this thing with Universal Horror Monsters. When you were a kid, they had these lines with like the Creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, etc. And I remember they like had info cards with it, and those info cards showed Lon Chaney Jr. just going through the woods with all that smoke and those trees and just that makeup with him with the underbite, and it's just everything about it is so cool. And if you haven't seen The Wolfman, definitely go do yourself a favor. It's a great one. I will say it definitely just ends, like the film just ends. That's something I have noticed about some of these Universal horror monster films, is they kind of just end. Like there's hardly a climax at all. So I don't know about that, but it's a great film, and I definitely would recommend it. And just like the 30s, I happen to have seen all of the horror films that I own currently from the 1940s. So I also have to consult the TCM Fright Favorites book right now and talk about another film that I really want to watch. In fact, what I love about this one in particular is it is a nice dynamic to the Wolfman. So we talked about the Wolfman, we talked about dogs. So let's actually talk about cats. Let's talk about cat people. This is something that I still have not seen. I have not seen Cat People, I know. This is from 1942, and it's something that I'm certainly a little bit blinded by, but I cannot wait to watch this film. I've heard so many great things about it, and if you've seen it, please tell me down below why I should go see it. But yeah, the Cat People is something that I've watched renditions, or at least I've seen many editions of this film, or maybe sequels of it, around, but I haven't seen the original. I haven't seen any of them actually, so I'm really curious to know how this film is, and I can't wait to explore. So that's actually in the 1940s. A lot of the Universal sequels were in those years, and in fact, there's like an honorable mention of like Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. That's one of my favorite comedies of all time, and I'm sure to watch that very, very soon as well. But there's so many good films in the 1940s, but I want to know, what are your favorites in the 1940s? Please tell me down in the comment section down below, what are your favorite horror films? Let's actually move on from here to the 1950s. Moving right along to the 1950s, we'll talk about a film that I haven't seen first, and it's a film that I actually just recently picked up, and something that involves big monsters, and I always love huge monster films like Godzilla and King Kong, but this is a film called Them. And Them is a creature feature, and let's just say, by far the best of the 50 cycles of creature features. We have all these giant monsters in here. I think I recall seeing this playing on TCM when I was younger, when my dad was watching it. I want to say I recall it, but I'm certainly in love with this cover. Like, holy crap, look at that. It's like straight out of a comic book, sci-fi. Kill one and two takes its place. The city is under martial law until we annihilate them. And them is in parentheses. And so yeah, I cannot wait to check this film out. Have you seen it? This is one film that I saw in my films from the 1950s that I'm certainly curious about, and I cannot wait to watch it. It looks like a really, really fun time, and I might even watch it with some friends. Who knows? But my favorite film from the 1950s when it comes to horror, it could be considered a horror film, but it is to me, and that is from 1955, Charles Lofton's The Night of the Hunter. Man, oh man, what a film. And I'm sure I've talked to death about this, and I'm sure other people have talked to death about this film, but man, what atmosphere, what performances. Robert Mitchum, wow. He is just terrifying in this film. The production in this, the eerie setting, everything about this film is just chilling, and it's certainly one of the most effective films I've ever seen. When it comes to just so many things, when it comes to just creeping into that anxiety that you might have. And it's just really, really wonderful. I highly recommend Night of the Hunter. If you haven't seen this film, go do yourself a favor, pay the extra money, because I think I have the 2-disc version of this from Criterion. It's just so wonderful. And it's this nice black and white. I couldn't imagine this in any other, I couldn't imagine this with color. So yeah, it's such a good film. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. Those are my picks from the 1950s. What are yours? There's so many picks Like I said, every time we keep adding more and more years, there's so many things to choose from the 1950s. I want to know your 2 favorites from the 1950s. Tell me down in the comment section down below. Let's actually end this video with the 1960s, which is where horror ramped up like crazy. Right, the 1960s. So Hammer horror had really kind of taken over a lot of the Universal horror that existed previously to this. A lot of noirs were kind of going away, and we're getting into some really occulty things. And so this is the stuff that I really love. In fact, I actually want to talk about 2 films from 1968. One of them I haven't seen, one I have seen, which is my favorite of the decade. So let's actually talk about the one I have not seen yet. In fact, this is a film called The Devil Rides Out, and I love that cover right there. I heard this movie is nuts. And my friend Daniel Epler from Cobwebs, he actually recommended this to me. And we were actually on an episode recently with our friend Christian Hurtado. I love you, Chris. I still miss you. But we actually had this in our horror movie marathon, our 24-hour imaginary horror marathon. If you're curious about that podcast, I'll link it in the description down below. But it's a really wonderful film that Daniel had definitely sold me on. That cover is just fantastic. The beauty of woman, the demon of darkness, the unholy union of the devil's bride. What more do you want? And then let's end on the devil, right? And I know you were talking about, I know you know where I'm going. From 1968, Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby. This is absolutely one of the most terrifying films of all time, and it still remains to this day to be one of the scariest films out there. And I absolutely love this film. It's one that's still chilling. It's got John Cassavetes in it. It has Mia Farrow in it, and just everyone in this film is just scary because everything's so normal. And that's the thing about this film that just is really kind of terrifying. Like, there's something a little off with some of the people as you progress through the film, but you really don't know what's going on. And I really love it. And if you haven't seen Rosemary's Baby, definitely go check this out. This is in the Criterion Collection. It's really wonderful piece right here. And the music in this film is just, oh, it's so scary. It's a scary film, and I might have to watch it very, very soon. So what about your picks from the 1960s? I'm curious to know what your favorite films from the 1960s of horror are. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I hope that you all enjoyed it, and I cannot wait to make part 2, where we're talking about 1970s all the way up to modern day and talking about the films that I have seen and I haven't seen. So what about you? What are your favorite films from these decades? I want to know down in the comment section down below. Please, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to seeing all of you next time, and I hope you have all a spooky month. Like, comment down below, share this video, hit that notification bell, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.